Okay, I want you to picture a scene. The year is 2006.
Mm-hmm.
The location is a computer lab in a secondary school in Toulouse, France. The room is absolutely packed with 15-year-olds,
Mm.
and it is chaotic.
Okay.
I mean, they are shouting, they're cheering, and they're smashing the keys in their keyboard so hard that the little plastic caps are literally flying off the machines.
Wow. It sounds like a riot. Or maybe, a very intense high-stakes tournament of Counter-Strike or something.
You would think so. But this is actually a classroom, and these students are playing a government-funded educational game
Not educational game.
designed to teach them about industrial maintenance and electrical engineering.
Right, which, let's be honest, are professions that rarely inspire that level of physical violence or adrenaline.
Exactly.
Mm.
So the question we're asking today is what on earth was happening in that room? We are doing a deep dive into a PhD thesis by Quentin Alvarez titled From Video Game to Serious Game. And we're really zooming in on Chapter 2.
And this chapter is so crucial. It's called the pragmatic approach, but I think of it as the crash test.
The crash test. I like that.
Yeah, because Alvarez didn't just write about the theory of learning. He built a game called Technocity, threw it into a room full of teenagers, and, well, he watched it crash and burn.
And it is a spectacular crash. It really exposes this massive fundamental rift between the serious, learning a trade, thinking about your future, and the game.
The dopamine hit of winning.
Exactly.
And it just challenges the biggest assumption in edtech, which you still see everywhere today. The idea that if you make learning fun, students will automatically absorb the material.
Right.
Alvarez's findings in this chapter suggest that sometimes the fun actually kills the learning.
So let's set the stage a bit more.
Yeah.
Why did they even build Technocity? What was the problem the local education authority was trying to solve?
Well, the problem was an image crisis. The education authority, the Rectorat de Toulouse, was struggling to get kids interested in technical professions.
So we're talking about things like
We're talking about jobs like building maintenance, industrial cleaning, electrical engineering. In the mid-2000s, these were invisible to students, or worse, they were viewed very negatively.
okay, so not exactly on the dream career list for most 14-year-olds.
Not at all. They want to be rock stars or footballers,
Yeah.
So the authority thought we need to speak their language. And in 2006, that language was video games. They commissioned Technocity. The hypothesis was what we call the chocolate-covered broccoli strategy.
Right. Wrap the boring career advice. The broccoli inside a tasty video game shell.
The chocolate. Exactly. The creators believed that if the students were entertained by the gameplay, the knowledge about industrial careers would just sort of slip into their brains through osmosis. They wouldn't even realize they were learning.
Let's talk about the game itself, because reading the description in the thesis, it feels like a total time capsule.
It really does. The
Huh.
game structure was a mix of different zones or rubrics. You had the clips, which were just videos of professionals talking about their jobs. And then you had the games.
And the games were a bit eclectic. You had a simulation where you managed a building trying to improve its energy efficiency. You had a driving game on the road. And then, my personal favorite,
I know where you're going.
you had a game about catching bees.
The B game. It sounds ridiculous, but it becomes the smoking gun of this entire study. We'll get to why in a minute. But the most 2006 detail has to be the reward system.
Oh, I loved this part. They weren't playing for high scores on a global leaderboard or anything like that. If you won, you got points that you could exchange for ringtones and logos for your flip phone.
Which is just hilarious now, but you have to remember the context. For a teenager in 2006, a custom ringtone was social currency. It was a high-value item.
So the incentives were real. The students wanted the rewards. Theoretically, this should have been a slam dunk.
On paper, yeah. You play the game, you watch the clips to unlock the next level, you learn about being an engineer, and you get a cool ringtone. Everyone wins.
But Alvarez did something that's actually pretty rare. He didn't just launch the game and assume it worked. He ran an alpha test.
Right, he put real students in a classroom with their teachers and the school principal, and they just watch what happened.
And this is where the reality check hits hard. You mentioned the fun trap earlier. Walk us through what happened when the kids actually started playing.
Well, initially, it looked like a massive success. The students were so engaged, they were glued to the screens. If you were a casual observer walking past the lab, you'd say, wow, they love industrial maintenance.
And they were obsessed with the bee game and the motorbike game specifically.
Correct. But here's the twist. When the researchers stopped them afterwards and asked, okay, did you see the video about the industrial cleaning technician? Did you learn what that job entails? The answer was a flat no.
One student literally said, "No, I didn't see them," which is just wild because the videos were right there. You had to click past them.
They were physically there, but cognitively they were invisible. There's a quote from a student about the bee game that explains this perfectly. He said, "I liked it because when you catch them, you get points."
That's it. That's the whole reason.
That's it. His brain was entirely focused on that simple loop. Action leads to reward. See B, click B, get points. Anything that wasn't a B or a point, like the actual career advice, was just noise. It was an obstacle to be clicked past as fast as possible.
So the game mechanics were actually distracting them from the lesson. The game part was cannibalizing the serious part.
It's a phenomenon called cognitive tunneling. You focus so hard on the immediate task winning that your peripheral vision, both literal and metaphorical, just shuts down. The students were in hunter mode, not learner mode.
And there was another layer to this, a social one. The thesis calls it the group phenomenon.
Oh, this is fascinating. The teachers noticed that the students weren't really acting as individuals at all.
How so?
Well, they pointed out that in a class of 15-year-olds, there's usually a leader. If that leader says, "This game is lame," everyone agrees. If the leader says, "The B game is cool," then everyone plays the B game.
There's a specific detail where the class leader actually silenced the whole room.
Right.
He just controlled the vibe completely.
Right. So the researchers realized the feedback they were getting might not even be individual opinions. It was just the group consensus dictated by the hierarchy of the playground. But there was another barrier, maybe even harder to overcome. The teachers called it the second-degree problem.
This is the Simpsons analogy, isn't
Yeah.
it? I found this part so insightful.
It's a brilliant observation. The teacher said when adults watch a show like The Simpsons, they see the satire. They get the second degree of humor, the irony, the social commentary.
But kids.
Kids at that age, they often watch at the first degree. They just see a yellow guy falling down and getting hurt. They laugh at the slapstick, not the satire. They take it literally.
And how did that apply to Technocity?
Well, the game tried to use metaphors. Manage this building like you manage a career. These bees represent elements of an ecosystem. But the students didn't abstract it. They didn't step back and think, what does this bee represent?
They just thought, catch bee, get points.
Exactly. The metaphor completely failed. They played the game literally, while the lesson was hidden figuratively.
Okay, so we've got students destroying keyboards to get points, ignoring the actual content, and missing all the metaphors. To understand why this failure was so total, Alvarez brings in an expert for an interview in this chapter, Andre Trico.
Trico is a psychology professor, and honestly, reading his interview, he just tears the whole project apart. He introduces something he calls question theory.
And this, for me, this changes how you view all education.
It really does. Trico says, and this is the core of it, you cannot inform someone who isn't asking a question.
That sounds simple, but let's break that down. What does he mean?
Well, think about how you learn best. You usually learn when you have a problem you can't solve. You think, how do I fix this leaking pipe? Then you go watch a YouTube video and you actually retain the information because it answers a specific need you have.
Right. The information fills a gap that I'm actively trying to fill myself.
Exactly. Trico argues that information is only useful if it answers a problem the user already has. Now ask yourself, what questions is a 15-year-old asking?
What are my friends doing? How do I get that cool ringtone? Is this class almost over?
That's it. They are not asking, what are the intricacies of industrial maintenance workflows?
So when Technocity provides the answer to that unasked question,
It's just meaningless noise. It's an answer to a question nobody in the room was asking. Trico says you can't just push information onto people. You have to first create the problematization. You have to make them have the question.
and this connects to what he calls the Nike fallacy.
Yes.
Right?
The just do it mentality. There's this belief in education that motivation is everything. If the kid wants to play the game, they'll somehow want to learn the material.
But isn't motivation good? If they're motivated to play, that's half the battle, isn't it?
Trico says no, it's a trap. He argues motivation is specific to the activity. You can be highly motivated to play Mario Kart. That doesn't mean you're motivated to learn about internal combustion engines.
The motivation to play doesn't transfer to motivation to learn.
Not at all. The students were motivated to win ringtones, not to plan their careers. And this leads to the distinction he makes between level 1 and level 2.
Level 1 is the game itself.
Yep. Level 1, the game. Is it fun? Is it playable? Technocity sort of succeeded there. The kids were engaged. But level 2 is the pedagogy. Does it teach?
And his argument is that if level 1 is too intense, it completely suppresses level 2.
Which brings us right back to the broken keyboards. That was level 1 running amok.
It's such a great example of what the thesis calls misaligned flow. The teacher saw the kids smashing keys and thought, my God, they're destroying school property.
Yeah.
But a game designer might look at that and say, wow, look at that engagement.
But it's the wrong kind of engagement. It's what they call ludic engagement as opposed to cognitive engagement.
Ludic as in play.
Yeah. They were engaged in beating the machine. They were trying to brute force the system. There was no reflection. In fact, reflection would have slowed them down and cost them points.
The thesis also points out a really interesting gender difference in how they approached this brute force method.
Yes, this came from a related interview with a flight simulator instructor, but it applied to the Technocity observations too. They noticed that the boys and girls approached the whole thing very differently.
How so?
The girls tended to be more procedural. They'd read the instructions, try to understand the rules, and then play. They were trying to figure out the system before engaging. They were, more studious.
And the boys?
The boys treated it purely as a competition loop. They would skip the instructions entirely, crash the plane or lose the game, and then immediately hit retry over and over, just guessing the right buttons to get the high score faster.
That sounds painfully familiar. I think I've played a lot of games that way.
Well, it highlights that play isn't just one thing. For the boys in this study, play meant mastery and performance. For the girls, it was more about navigation and compliance. But here's the kicker. Neither group was really learning the career content.
Because for both groups, the content was secondary to just interacting with the game.
And that content was also competing with something else. There's this devastating quote from a student interview in the thesis. The researcher asks him what he plays at home.
And he says Grand Theft Auto and Counter-Strike.
The elephant in the room. When you bring a video game into a classroom, you are implicitly inviting that comparison. You're saying, hey, this is a game just like the ones you love.
But Technocity was made on a modest government budget in 2006. It is definitely not GTA.
It's like serving a veggie burger to someone expecting a steak. If you try to make it look like a steak, you're just going to disappoint them. Technocity was a bad game compared to GTA, and it was a boring lesson compared to, well, pretty much anything else. It lost on both fronts.
So, okay, the project had broken keyboards, ignored videos, and kids who just wanted ringtones. It feels like a total failure. But Alvarez uses this failure to build a new theory in the chapter's conclusion.
He does. He realizes that the chocolate-covered broccoli model, the integration model, just doesn't work. You can't just mash the game and the lesson together.
So he proposes a connection model instead. He draws a diagram of the potential learning space.
The espace potentiel d'apprentissage. It's a triangle. You have the learner, the game, and the content. But Alvarez argues that for this triangle to work, you need a fourth element that was missing in that alpha test.
The mediator.
Exactly. A human, a teacher, to bridge the gap. You need someone to pause the game and say, okay, stop smashing the keyboard. Why did you lose points there? What does that tell you about this job?
So the game provides the context, but the human provides the meaning.
Without the mediator, the game will always eat the serious. The mediator's job is to force the reflection that the game itself actually discourages.
This links to a design concept they talk about called affordance. I think this is really useful for our listeners to understand because it applies to everything, not just games.
Affordance is a term from design popularized by Donald Norman. It basically means, what does an object tell you to do with it just by looking at it?
Like a door handle. If it's a flat plate, it affords pushing. If it's a handle, it affords pulling.
Right. And if you have to put a sign on a door saying push a H because it has a handle, you have failed as a designer.
Because the design contradicts the instruction.
Exactly. Now apply that to Technocity. The educational goal said reflect, learn, plan your future. But the game design, the health bars, the scores, the timers, all of it said click fast, react, win.
The affordance of the game was rush, but the affordance of the lesson was stop and think.
They were fighting each other. The game was practically screaming at the students to ignore the lesson.
Okay, so if you were redesigning this today, based on everything in Chapter 2, what would you do differently?
I would listen to Trico. I wouldn't start with the answers. I would use the game to generate the questions.
Make the game about the failure.
Yes. Create a game where the student fails because they don't know how an electrical circuit works. Make them frustrated. Make them ask, wait, how do I fix this?
And then you show them the video.
Exactly. Then the video becomes the cheat code. It becomes the solution to their problem. You align the game goal, which is winning, with the serious goal, which is learning.
That's a huge shift. It's moving from gamification as sugarcoating to gamification as problem generation.
It is, and it solves the Nike fallacy. You aren't relying on their motivation to learn engineering. You're relying on their motivation to beat the level. You've made the knowledge the key to the game rather than an annoying interruption.
It seems so obvious in hindsight, but Technocity proves how easy it is to get it so wrong.
It's a great cautionary tale. It reminds us that engagement is a vanity metric. Just because eyes are on the screen doesn't mean brains are working on the problem you actually want them to solve.
So here's a thought to leave you with. We're surrounded by gamification now. We have Duolingo for languages, apps for fitness, leaderboards for sales teams.
It's everywhere.
But based on this deep dive into Chapter 2, we have to ask, are we actually learning Spanish, or are we just getting good at playing the Duolingo game?
That is the provocative question, isn't it? If the app is too fun, are we just getting good at clicking the right buttons to keep our streak alive while the actual language skills atrophy?
Are we just catching bees to get ringtones?
I think a lot of the time we are, and if the only way we can make people care about something is to trick them with a game, are we solving the problem of education? Or are we just hiding it behind a high score?
Something to mull over the next time you're chasing XP on your phone. Thanks for diving deep into the messy, broken keyboard reality of serious games with us.
Always a pleasure to unpack the mechanism.
See you next time.